While they are setting up my computer, I must just thank you for inviting me. I had an appointment in Berlin at a very big corporate meeting there. But when I heard the word Sarajevo, I decided to say yes to this instead. So my wife went to Berlin. Since I watched the Olympics as a 9-year-old, I have always wanted to come here. Of course, I should come here in winter as well, I realize. How many of you have answered my little questionnaire? Raise your hand if you answered the 13 questions. No, it should be more of you, actually, I think. Because there were plenty, 150 or so answered the questions. And we're going to look at the results. The moment I see my thing on the... Could we give an applause to the people in the technical booth there? So they... Yes, here, now things are happening. So the first question I asked you was about climate change, right? I asked this one. Global climate experts believe that over the next 100 years, the average temperature on Earth will, A, B, or C, get warmer, colder, or be the same. So I'm not asking what you think, I'm asking what the experts think, right? And we have tested these questions in 14 countries to the general public in online panels. I'm going to show you the results, but let's start with this one. The correct answer is that the experts believe the world will get warmer, right? Do people know this? That's what my foundation is all about, knowledge and facts. Are people aware of what the experts are saying? We keep informing about climate, but what Gapminder has done is actually tested if people are aware of it. And here are the results from August 2017 in 14 countries. In Sweden, 82% picked the right answer. 18% of the Swedes haven't really heard what the experts are saying. This is often referred to as climate denial, okay? The unwillingness to see the facts and hear what the experts have concluded. Here are the results from the other countries. And unfortunately, Sweden was not the best, okay? Hungary and Spain and France outbeat Sweden with 94, 92, 89% correct answers. And in this eminent audience here today, here are your results from Sarajevo 2018. You can see at the bottom, I'm going to show the results from this poll. It's fantastic. Please clap your hands. You are just as good as the Hungarian public, like the world champions in climate awareness, right? There is still a little bit denial in the room. 8%, they don't know about it. Let's look at the other questions. This one, for example, we're asking about big global facts. Vaccination programs is an enormous effort. But how many 1-year-olds are reached by the vaccination? Is it 80% of the 1-year-old have been vaccinated, 50 or 20? This is the data. Let me show you the statistics. Because in the news, you often hear the journalist talking about in times like these. You have heard that expression. I don't know how it translates to the local language, but the feeling that now we're in a very bad state in world history. I would turn that around a little bit and say this is the first time in world history where we have got data to track progress. That is what really differentiates our time from all the previous times. And now we know the vaccination coverage and the uncertainty is quite low. Since I was born when 22% of children were vaccinated, today 88% of children are vaccinated in the world. That was almost unthinkable 30, 40 years ago. But modern medicine has reached almost everybody. It's only 12% of children missing in the world globally. What do people think? Well, that's the correct answer. We rounded it downwards to 80 to not exaggerate the progress, because people would use that against us, saying you're exaggerating, the world is not as... No, so we say 80 is the correct answer. Okay, here are the results from our study, and Sweden was the winner this time. 21% of the Swedes got the right answer. 79% of the Swedes, and you see in the other countries, like 90, 80%, are vaccination deniers, okay? They don't want to see the progress of vaccination. Like we talk about climate denials. Can you see what a success the climate information was? 80–90% know what the expert says. When we come to other development things, and that's the other 12 questions, people are completely unaware of what has happened on Earth. That's why they are so complaining. Look at the chimpanzees, for example. We went to the zoo, and all the questions have A, B, C alternatives. So you give a chimpanzee at the zoo bananas, 3 bananas, A, B, C, and you repeat that 1,000 times. 33% of the times they will pick the right banana, right? They can't read the question, so they pick A or B or C. And 1/3 of them would actually pick the right banana, and that means up here, right? So if the people in these countries were randomly guessing, they would score 33%, but they don't. How can humans score worse than random on global development questions? That's what my foundation works with. We fight misconceptions with a fact-based worldview. Misconceptions is when you score worse than random because you got something in your head that the chimpanzees don't have, right? It's not knowledge. It's absolutely not knowledge, because that would bring you above randomness, right? So this is systematic. Let's see the score in this group. Are you ready to not clap your hands? You're better than Sweden! Excellent. See, you're better than Sweden. You're not close to the chimpanzee, but you can compare yourself with Sweden. 23%, excellent. You can come to us and teach about vaccination. No, actually, 77% of you believe that most children are not vaccinated, or half of children are not vaccinated. Absolutely wrong. It's only 12% missing vaccination. This means that 88% of this globe has been reached by modern medicine. There are harbors where the vaccines can arrive, there are roads, there is electricity to keep the vaccines cold, and there are educated nurses. All these things is what's needed for an industrial revolution to take place, right? And that can happen in 88% of the globe right now. But when we test this question, for example, I went to Berlin and I talked after Merkel at the World Health Summit, and the room was full with public health experts in big data. And here are their results. Even the public health experts themselves are unaware of the progress in their own field. That's what I'm working with. I'm trying to compare people with monkeys so they realize what an enormous ignorance we have. Instead, they think the world is getting worse. And then we went to one of the biggest banks in the world in London. I can't mention the name because my father signed a paper there. And that was the worst result we ever saw. Okay, 4% picked the right answer. Instead, 85% of them thought the world is getting, actually that only 20% of children are vaccinated. These financial bankers believe they live in a world where only a fraction of mankind have modernized. In London, right now, they are investing the rich people's money. That's the problem that I'm fighting with misconception. World Economic Forum, yeah, terrible results. So don't feel ashamed. It's a general human problem. Like when you see visual illusions. When we look at the world, it's like a visual illusion. We always think it's worse than it is. And when 90% of people score this bad, we should not take it personally. It has nothing to do with us. The Nobel laureates and medicine scientists, I don't have time for this. It's in the book. You can read about it. Wherever we go, the more expert people are, they tend to score even worse in their own. If they are activists, it's even worse. Then they score crazy, really, really bad. No, so here are the journalists then. We went to journalist conferences. People like to blame the media and say the media portray the world very badly. So they are lying with fake news. I don't like that debate because it's pointing fingers at the journalists. And when we test the journalists, they are equally bad at a US news conference, EU news conference, fact filmmakers like Discovery Channel and National Geographic. They don't know the world either. So they are not lying, because lying is if you know correctly but you say something else. No, they are not lying. They also have suffered from this illusion of a very bad world. So how do we fix this? Well, we develop teaching materials to fight We ask fact questions, but behind the fact questions, people don't know the percentages. So they go guessing using their gut feeling on a worldview level. And we think these 3 mega misconceptions is what most people suffer from, which make them score worse than chimpanzees. First, and I'm going to go through these, the world is divided into rich and poor countries. The world is getting worse in most ways, people think they are, and the world population just increases. Let's start with the first one. The feeling that the world is divided into a few people are rich, like Bill Gates, for example, very rich, right? And then most people are very poor. It's a very easy way, because there are huge inequalities in the world. So most people are actually in the middle. And here is where Gapminder developed free software. This is on our website. You can go to the website and see this chart. When the Olympics was in Sarajevo, this shows the total world population. Okay, let me explain a little bit more. On the x-axis, we have dollars per day. So extreme poverty rate, $1.9 per day, is here. Back then, 44% of humanity was in extreme poverty when the Olympics was in Sarajevo. Sarajevo was not one of them. The former Eastern Europe was actually in the rich hump. You see, the world was 2 humps, with the poor down here in extreme poverty, and then we watched the Winter Olympics. We were here, right? The richer part of the world. The world was simple, rich and poor. But that was back then in 1984. Look what happened since then. Across the world, people have gotten richer. You see? And today the world looks like this. We don't have 2 humps anymore. The majority of people, 75%, live in middle-income countries. Their children are vaccinated and they are prepared for natural disasters like ever before. 5 billion people are right there in the middle. But the bankers in London have missed it. They fail to realize that's where they should invest. That's what I'm working with. It's very fun. It's just official numbers from the World Bank and IMF, etc. But they need to be understandable. Statistics need to be made understandable. So let's go back here and see if we, instead of dividing the world into developing and developed, which is completely misleading, we should think of it like Pokemon or a computer game. You level. You go from level 1 to level 2, level 3, level 4. And basically on level 2, you have textile industry. On level 3, you start to build cars. And in Sweden today, on level 4, we can't afford having the car industry any longer. We have to do Spotify and other stuff. Okay? That's pretty much how countries evolve. And all the rich countries have gone through this kind of areas in different way. My wife is brilliant. She's not here, she's in Berlin. But she came up with a brilliant idea because people hate statistics. And still, we need to make them understand it, right? So she said, imagine the world as a street. Everybody live on the same long, long street. We call it Dollar Street. The poorest to the left, and here are all the houses in the world on the same street. And in your block, you have people from Ukraine, Brazil, Indonesia. They share the same income. Let's see what life looks like. Okay, so she sent out photographers to 200 homes in the world. This is just a way to teach global statistics. And here are the beds in, if we take all countries in the world. It's an offline tool which is freely available, like everything I'm showing is freely available on Gapminder's website for teaching, right? Here are all the beds inside those houses. So photographers took photos of 130 items. Let's look at the teeth, okay? What about dental health across Dollar Street? So now we're looking at statistics, but people don't realize it. We see what the numbers really mean. And for all the SDGs, there are things we could take photos of. Some things are easier than others, or toothbrushes, for example, right? You can see that down here on the poorest level, you might be using a stick to brush your teeth, and then here you got 1 toothbrush in the middle of Dollar Street, 1 toothbrush for the whole family. And when you get a bit richer, you have the opportunity to stop sharing your toothbrush with your grandma, which is a very nice day in life, you know, when you got your own toothbrush. That's what development is all about, right? It's very concrete, it's not numbers. So then instead of thinking of the world as poor and rich, where they have no shoes and we got cars, 5 billion people are right in between on level 2 and 3, and they got bicycles, 3 billion people roughly, and then 2 billion are going to use a motorcycle. And in this framework, we should ask, where is Bosnia and how is it going to develop into the future? Because there are people in Bosnia and Herzegovina living on all these different levels, more or less. You don't have too many down in extreme poverty, actually. But that is the landscape, and Sweden evolved with people on all the levels, even though we look a lot at averages. But averages are misleading. misleading. We get these huge differences within countries. So for example, if we pick one country, I have too little time, so I can't go into the details, but you can check the TED talk that my wife Anna gave about this. Here are the toothbrushes in Sweden, and we could instead look at the homes and see the families, how they live on different income levels inside Sweden. And to do the same kind of dollar street in Bosnia and Herzegovina would be excellent to show the differences on the countryside and in the city. You have enormous differences to get the complex picture of this country. Which can be taught in school in Sweden as well, you know, to have a different perception. I believe if we asked fact questions in Sweden about Bosnia-Herzegovina, they would believe it's much poorer than it actually is. And with the war history, you often have a misconception decades after. So this would be a very interesting ignorance testing between countries, which I would love to do. Okay, misconception number 2, the world is getting worse, right? We hear about, with better news coverage, we hear more about terrible things. Even when they are fewer, we get more reports, and we get the illusion that everything is getting worse, because we never hear about the progress between the dips, right? And that's a common human problem. You ask people in many countries, is the world getting better or worse? And this is how they answer. In Sweden, only 10% say the world is getting better. 66% say it's getting worse. So if you in Bosnia-Herzegovina hear people say that it's getting worse, it has nothing to do with this country. It's the human brain, okay? You hear exactly the same thing in Sweden, in Portugal, in Tunisia, South Africa. It's the human condition. Things are just getting worse all the time. But when you look at the statistics, let's look at the statistics. It's not correct. Extreme poverty, for example, I asked you, how did it develop over the last 20 years? Well, it dropped to half, and that has never happened in 20 years ever before. In Sweden, the best in the world in this, because my father has been teaching so much about it, actually we outscore all the others. Let's look at this audience in this room here. The chimpanzees, of course, they win over the Swedes, but in this room, yeah, actually, sorry, there's the wrong text there, but 31% picked the right answer. So you were better than Swedes when it came to extreme poverty. A big applause. This is how it dropped since 1800 globally. Back then, almost 90% of humanity was in extreme poverty. They had nothing to eat once a month and went to bed hungry, right? Today, that has dropped down like this. Is the world getting better? Most people would say, yeah, if they just remember, but they don't. They should ask their grandma, how was life? It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. My grandparents always told me about how their growing up was. They had food in Sweden. So we have a tendency to forget. This is an interesting one. Natural disasters, how many do they kill every year? The trend over the last 100 years. And the correct answer, let's look at the data from the International Disaster Database. Because today, in times like these, we have data, okay? We can see how many died back 100 years ago. In the decade average, thousands of deaths per year. 330,000 died 100 years ago. And then, is the correct answer A, B, or C? Well, let's look at the data. Up till 1930, it increased, actually, the number of deaths per year. Then the economic development across Asia, etc., took place. And today, humanity's preparedness for disaster is better than ever before. Right? We are so ready for disasters. We got the flooding preparedness in place and storm preparedness. We've never been able to protect ourselves against Mother Nature. But this is the first time in history. But when we ask people, they think the world is getting worse. And that's very unfortunate, actually, because they lose hope. The correct answer is obviously A. The other ones are very wrong answers. The deaths per year has decreased. And what did the Swedes answer? Only 15% picked the right answer. They see so much natural disasters on the TV, right? They see more and more, the better TV we got, and they think the world is getting worse. It's not. And look in France, only 3% in France picked the right answer. Should we compare you with France now? Let's do that. Not with the chimpanzees, right? Business in Sarajevo, you don't have this problem. This is excellent. You're like chimpanzees. How wonderful. That's a good starting point for learning, not starting below randomness, but on randomness. Now you have learned that development and preparedness is much better today. So maybe the 67% of you could actually pick the right answer after this presentation. So here are 16 bad things decreasing: legal slavery, HIV, smallpox, lead in gasoline, ozone depletion, all these things that humans have been fighting for. And as soon as we achieve it, we forget about it. It's enormous achievements, and we can learn the lessons from what made us actually stop putting lead in gas. It was tons of legislation thanks to the UN family, and today it's only lead in gasoline in 3 countries, and nobody talks about it any longer. It's a terrible thing to have lead in gas. We should remember how that success story of global collaboration took place. And we shouldn't forget about it. We should teach about it in schools so that the future goals can be achieved with the same methodology that works. Global collaboration. That's exactly what happened. And ozone depletion. And then 16 good things increasing. Looking at the data, it's very easy to find things that are getting better, which people don't know about. But everything that is getting worse, when I test it, people exaggerate it even worse. So that's the misconceptions are truly skewed towards the negative all the time. So let me just show you quickly this development, the tool that we've been designing. These are now country averages. The differences within countries are enormous, of course. We're showing on the x-axis here is money. So you got rich to the right and poor to the left. It's GDP per capita in PPP 2011, constant dollars. Here is life expectancy. How long do you live? We can clearly see there are not 2 groups of countries, right? We can pick Bosnia-Herzegovina. It's right there, almost in the middle of the world, right? Actually, slightly above. So the majority of mankind are on a lower income level, and actually a vast majority is on a lower life expectancy level. The life expectancy in this country is almost the best on this income level. It's only in Peru they are better. So maybe you should go to Peru and ask what they do differently. There's something with the public health system. Oh, they drink less vodka, I know. Okay. Lebanon is there, and Costa Rica, right? So, but you are on the top on this economic level, using the money very, very effectively in terms of public health. That's amazing. It's actually the case with most of the previous Soviet and Eastern Yugoslavia, and all these East Bloc countries usually have good public health, except for the vodka drinking in many parts. Okay, let's go back 200 years in history to see how the world looked like. We bring because we got data. Year by year, countries have been moving. So we go quickly back 200 years, and all of them disappear. Because 200 years ago, there was no country on the levels where the countries are today. All of them. It's an amazing development. If we then zoom out like this to see where they are, back then, the average life expectancy was 30, more or less, in most of the countries. I would be dead back then, you know. I would probably not have survived. And since then, over the first 100 years, the Western European countries and USA, etc., developed faster than the others. Up until 1950, after World War I and II here, United Nations is created. Even then, there was not really a clear separation between 2 kinds of countries. Since then, enormous progress has happened. Look at this. Are you ready to clap your hands for humanity, what we have achieved? Bringing up life expectancy together with more money. Year by year, small progress. Every country is taking small steps. Suddenly, you see dips because of diseases, etc. But you see the smooth movement. It never moves. Yeah, let's clap our hands. We'll look at it again. We pick Bosnia, and we do Sweden, compare it with Sweden. This is freely available online. You can download it and also put in other data on the other axis. If we take Sweden and Bosnia, Herzegovina, and we go back to 1960, let's go to 1996 for very good reasons. Historically, we have recreated the numbers as if the borders of today were there historically, because it's much easier to look at if things are not flickering all the time. Okay, but that's from 1996 we can look at the data like this, and since then this is the progress of these 2 countries. Sorry, I wanted to have trails. You can actually click here so they leave a little line. Okay, we go there, and this is now. I'm going to reduce the speed a little bit, and then we push play, and we can see that year by year Bosnia-Herzegovina has been developing. You can see pretty fast there if the data is good enough. Sweden is moving much slower. Can you see that? Okay, so if you keep this rate up, you're going to catch up with Sweden in roughly, is it 20 years? Up till where we were in 19, maybe 30 years with the current speed. It's going to be like Sweden here. And that's actually what has happened in most countries. But 30 years, yeah, just do it. Please do it. It's a great level to live on, income-wise, right? So if we go back with Sweden historically, you can see that the speed of Sweden was roughly the same. We go back to where Sweden was in 1950, roughly where this country is today. In 1955, we have roughly the GDP per capita that Bosnia-Herzegovina has today, but you have better life expectancy than we had. And you can see how the way Sweden got there was by small growth every year. That's how it happens. No other country, well, South Korea, of course, did something very strange. If you want to go faster, you can do the South Korea thing, right? But then they stop. When they come to the top, it's like, ugh, they can't go further. Okay, let's see. So the world is changing all the time. And the world market is changing all the time. And instead, people think things are getting worse. But many things are getting better. I'm not saying everything. Please keep two thoughts in your head at the same time. The world is getting better, and the world is bad. Okay? Yes, it's bad. Tons of bad things, but getting better. Couldn't we fit those two at the same time in our head? That's exactly what's needed to fight the last problems. Okay, the last one, I'm going to go super fast because it's simple, actually. Why is the world population growing? We're going to be 4 billion more people on this planet. It's the core ingredients in the sustainability equation, right? How many people can this planet support? And then when I ask fact questions, people are totally ignorant. All the way at the World Economic Forum, at the UN, and everywhere we ask, people don't understand demographic change. Let me just explain it very quickly. They get a feeling that there are just more people. And the misconception is the just. It's the feeling that it's just continuing, nothing is changing. It is continuing. There are expectations of 4 billion more people, roughly, maybe 5 even. And so let's start by memorizing this map. Please look at this map, and I'll be quiet for 5 seconds, and you memorize it. No, you cannot, okay? All of you have too small brains, and like me, so we have to simplify statistics. We cannot remember details like this. There's no way, unless we have some disease of some kind. Or diagnostic. Let's see, America, Africa, Europe, Asia. We divide the world into 4 equal parts, okay? And the 7 billion people, where do they live? It's very simple. 1 billion, on average, rounded numbers, live in Americas. 1 billion in West-East Europe, jointly Europe, okay? And 1 billion in Africa. It's quite simple. Now, this you can remember, right? Where are the other 4 billions then? Where is the world market? It's over in Asia. Okay? That's where the world market is. So we should discuss here how we can produce things and sell them over there, right? That's what we want to do. Okay, how many have a cell phone? Do you? Oh, only 5 people, great. How many of you know your PIN code? You know your PIN code, right? Yes, good. 4 numbers or maybe 6. I hope you have the 4. This is the PIN code to the world market, okay? 1114. Can you remember this? Okay, 1114. 4 is the big number here. It's going to change in the future, just like PIN codes change, right? So in the next 50 years, there will be 1 more billion over there in Asia. And then by the end of this century, 2 billion more roughly in Africa, right? So by the end of actually 2100, it's going to be something like this, 1145. And let's talk about us Europeans and our role in the future world market, okay? If we talk about the Western Europe that used to dominate world market, it's going to be 8% of humanity. It's not going to be the big guys any longer, right? Okay, and the others are 92%. If we, Europeans, want to be invited to the World Trade meetings, we have to start behaving nice, okay? No more bad behavior, because they will just exclude places like Bosnia-Herzegovina, Sweden, Alaska, you know, up there in the cold places. The World Trade Sea will be this one, the Indian Ocean, right? That's where everything will happen. So we have to have access to that. We can't just be too nasty. Okay. So countries across the world are changing all the time. Cultures are changing. Back in year 1800, on average, women gave birth to 6 babies, okay? It was roughly the same number all the way up to 1965 when the revolution happened. You know which revolution I mean? The biggest one in mankind's history, the sexual revolution. When we stopped having many babies, look at this. It's the most game-changing trend in human history because we redefined the human species and the number of offsprings we have. Not by having less sex, actually. We probably have more sex today, but we get fewer children because we figured out how to do it, right? It's very, very smart. It's very much, it's a knowledge thing, actually. It's not just modern contraceptives. It's also culture and tradition and value. Before, all countries across the world had this value of a big family, and I'm proud of it, especially the man. He was so proud of this big family. That was in Sweden too. My grandparents had 6 siblings each, right? And then it changed because the access to education for women and also for these children meant that I'd rather have 2 well-educated children instead of 6 poor children, right? And that changed across all the cultures and all the continents. Look at this. Europe came first and dropped fertility rate. America came after, that's a baby boom after the Second World War. And then came Asia with the fastest drop ever in Iran, actually. And Africa is also on its way. So across Catholic, Muslim, and all other religions, when economy increased and education is there, family sizes drop everywhere. Okay, at a slightly different speed, etc. But it's a change of the human culture. It's not a local thing with certain values. And the UN projections, these are the last facts I'm going to show you about the world, is just that this drop will continue. It requires more family planning, maybe not in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in other places. But if it continues, this is what they think will happen. So, when I ask you this question, there are 2 billion children today in the world between age 0 and 15. How many are the experts? I'm asking about what the experts think, not what you think. How many do they think it's going to be by the end of the century? 2, 3, or 4? Okay? The correct answer is 2. Exactly the same as now. No change. But what? They told you there are going to be 4 billion more people, right? But no more children. This is how people answered. In Sweden, 8% picked the right answer. Everybody's talking about sustainability, but nobody understands the core number, the basis of the population pyramid. They haven't understood what to expect. Okay? Of course, it's not certain. All forecasts are uncertain. Let's see this audience here today. That's pretty good, actually. That's among the best. You're almost like Japan and South Korea, right? You have pretty small families here, and that's usually what happens. But if we go forward and look at the data, this is UN official data. During the last 10 years, their curves have looked like this. And nobody pay attention. Everybody talk about sustainable development. No one looks at the demography. This is what they are expecting. But where are 4 billion adults going to come from? We all know where children come from, right? But where do grown-ups come from? They come from children. Right? But how can there be more of I have the answer. There will be spaceships. Okay, late at night. They come down with 4 billion when we are sleeping, you know? Maybe there is another explanation. It's pretty easy. Imagine everybody lived in one house, okay? On the ground floor, we have the children, 0 to 15 years old, right? On the next floor, the parents, 15 to 30, roughly, rounded numbers. And then on the other 3 floors, 15-year age groups, but only 1 billion people on each. That's what the human age structure look like today in the world. These are the 7 billion by age. And next, what's going to happen? My father used to say, sadly, the old will die, okay? Demography is very predictable, actually. People die roughly at the same ages, and they get roughly the same number of children at roughly the same ages, 30, okay? This is going to happen. They grow up, they fall in love, they make children, and they only make 2, okay? So now we got 2 billion children into the future. Sorry, it should say the year should be changing. Now we're up in 2045. I failed to change the number. When this continues 15 years at a time, we're now 9 billion people in the future, right? But there were no spaceships, right? And no more children, and it's not because of longer lives. This is expect middle-aged people. Can you see how the 3 floors were filled up? We call this the fill-up. It's called demographic momentum among demographers, but it's a fill-up. It's empty floors being filled up by younger generations growing up, having their children, and eventually with 10 billion. That's 3 of the billions. The last billion, the 4th, is actually because of longer lives. But that's only 1 of 4. So I would say there's nothing we can do to stop population growth. We should, of course, do everything we can to promote family planning just like we had so far. But there's nothing we can do to stop 4 billions. It's decent to have 2 children per family. I have 3. I could have 2, it's easier with 2, but they were so nice, the first 2 ones, I had a third one, okay? So this is the future population. Can you see how lack of knowledge here and misconceptions make people score worse than chimpanzees on fact questions? And then we can disclose it and say it's like a visual illusion of the world, where we follow our intuition, and that's what our book is showing. Now, here are the results on the 12 questions in the 14 countries. 15% scored 0 correct answers. No, a chimpanzee would never be able to do that. Here are all the other results. The most common results is 1 or 2 correct answers. One person got 11 correct answers. It was a person in Sweden, and nobody got 12, okay? This means the chimpanzee would get 4 out of 12, right? So 90%, 10% of people are better than the chimpanzee on global fact questions. So when you start informing about SDGs, you need to take this into account, that you're talking to people who think the world is here somewhere, but it's actually over here, and you want to bring it over there. But they think we're starting back there, and they say it's impossible. The world cannot be improved, because they think it's in a terrible shape. It's not. We're almost there. Those goals are the last mile. We have to go there. It's definitely doable. It has been done before at a very high speed. Okay, so here are the results from many countries. I can't show all these. Now, your total score looks like this. Here is from this room, okay? Sarajevo business meeting. Look, actually, on average, you scored 4. On average, the other people scored 2.2. So you were already better. You're 2 points better than the average person in a rich country where we have tested. 1/3 of you scored better than random. That's good, right? Of course, you should have 12 correct answers, definitely, to know how the world develops. I'm just going to skip through these. In the Factfulness Rules of Thumb, the book we have written is a very different book. That's why Bill Gates loves it. He gives it to all the college students because it's not an academic book. It is really a thinking habit book. How to avoid misunderstanding. Like, for example, expect bad news. Can you see that one? The dips goes down, it gets reported in the news, but in between the dips, the curve is going upwards, and you never hear about it. Children need to be aware of this. That's the Factfulness book. I just want to say one thing about Bosnia-Herzegovina, because I found it fascinating. I tried to read up on the economy. I'm not an expert in economics, but there is a fascinating project. We can use data to actually see what to do in a country. Of course, you need to know the local environment, but when you look at global development, country by country, what made Sweden rich? What made South Korea rich? It was different things from local circumstances at a unique point in human history. So the question is, how can we even learn from each other's experience when it's so different? Here is a brilliant project at Harvard by a Latin American professor, Ricardo Husman. He basically asked, I'm coming to that project. It's called Economic Complexity, and then I'm going to stop, okay? This is Swedish path over the share of industrialized workers, okay? Share of manufacturing in employment. When Sweden reached its peak in 1960, we had 45% employment in industry, okay? In manufacturing industry. That's where Bosnia and Herzegovina is today, but you only have 30. And this is a common pattern today in the world, that you basically, what it says at the top, deindustrialization happens too fast. You're trying to go for the fancy, cool new industries, but you could actually compete better in the old ones and stay there, or actually keep those industries for quite longer, 10 more years, 20 more years. That's a fascinating story across all of the emerging economies, where they actually, unfortunately, don't get these. So when we look at industries, any kind of product, how can you learn from others' experiences? Well, it's actually a question of know-how in the population. What do you know how to produce in a country? How can you measure that? Well, in the trade, if you look at the competition in the trade, where you have a competitive advantage, you can see that, for example, today, Bosnia and Herzegovina produced this. This is the export composition. Go to this website, Economic Complexity. It has all these data freely available. This is the current composition. You have a multitude of products you are exporting today, where you obviously are competitive. Otherwise, you could not export. This means you have the know-hows and the resources to produce this. Now, here comes the interesting things. Other countries that had seats, for example, or other furniture exports, what did they do next? That's the question. So you look at the trade statistics and you see those who were competitive in other furniture, what did they do next? Where did they become competitive next? And this professor at Harvard says, that's transferable know-how. You know how to do this thing, and it's not so difficult to learn these things, and suddenly you evolve to neighboring industries. So they created a map of all products, okay? And where you want to be on this map is in the middle. You want to be competing with products where you can easily move to the next product and start competing there as well. You don't want to be in the periphery where you have raw materials. And this is actually where Bosnia-Herzegovina is today. Can you see the colored maps? It's a very fortunate position where most countries would like to be. You have strong know-how. I'm not talking about formal education, actually. It's really the knowledge on the floor to produce certain things. Right now, there are many neighboring industries where Bosnia and Herzegovina could go next. So the question is, which ones are they? And on this website, I went there, he have listed for Bosnia and Herzegovina all the products where you could probably compete next, because other countries with the current production that you have then moved into these industries. So the left top corner here means the distance from where you are now is very low. It's easy to go into these businesses, and the complexity, which means it's in the center. If you go there, you will have even more opportunities afterwards. This is the closest to evidence-based guideline for where to go next for industries, I would say, where it's likely. The question is, and I think that's what this meeting is about, how do you get that know-how, the missing piece, to go to the neighboring industry? It's through networking with others who actually did it and starting to sell these products and produce them for other companies. Eventually, you develop your own company in the country and you start competing with the one you started. That takes 10 years later or something. But this is a way of thinking of industries which is not one guideline for all countries all the time. No, it's a very local circumstance. Right now you got this know-how, how can you transfer it to something even more competitive? I'd say that is my last slide, and the guide was glass fiber and these things. You can go look at the site. It's really fascinating. It's extremely concrete. Please go to Gapminder's website and take our test and get the diploma for a global fact-based worldview. And we are certifying news reporters and school teachers. So this is the kind of public education. I'm actually going to Mostar now after this presentation to give a little lecture and try to give them diplomas. So we bring the knowledge level up in the whole world so they realize the SDGs are actually achievable because they are not so far away. Hvala puno.